Fairly close to the new rental place. We just the first year-round house on Ripples Road.
She already has? Yeah. Oh.
Ripples, that comes to
And that's what I'm doing.
I mean, I just.
Yep.
Thanks for coming out. That is just if you'd like to receive updates for events that we have coming up.
Saturday. And June. And then I go on and like
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. My name is Zachary. I'm a librarian here in Northeast Harbor. The library is able to offer free programs like this year-round, thanks to the generosity of our donors, and thanks to our community of collaborators like the Mount Desert Sustainability Committee. So Rosemary, thank you very much, and everybody else on the committee. They helped organize this talk today. So coming up on Thursday next week, Down East Restorative Justice is holding a community discussion circle. Subject for this month is going to be how to navigate conflict. And Friday next week is our final movie night of the season. We're showing Summer of Soul, which is a documentary on the Harlem's Cultural Festival, featuring original footage from the 1969 event. To hear more about all of that and their upcoming programs, please use the sign-up sheet by the door, and that will subscribe you to our email newsletter. Tonight's presenter is an avid organic gardener and has maintained a home compost pile for nearly 20 years. A resident of West Tremont, she's an active member of the Bar Harbor Garden Club and volunteers with Friends of Acadia. Please welcome Susan Coan.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you, everybody, for showing up for this presentation. I'm really honored and pleased to be able to speak before you, and for those listening in at home, thank you for joining. Zach, I didn't ask you one thing, how to advance slides, just the arrow button?
Space should work.
Okay. A couple other thank yous, and you mentioned it. Thank you to the Mount Desert Sustainability Committee for making a request to the Bar Harbor Garden Club to have this talk tonight. I was glad to volunteer on behalf of the club to come out here and talk to you, because I am a composting enthusiast. I wouldn't ever say I'm an expert on it, but I've been doing it, as Zach says, my entire adult life. And even when I was a kid, my family had what we called the worm pile. We didn't call it composting. It was a pile of leaves and grass and kitchen scraps that we put in a pile, and it was used by my brothers to get worms and night crawlers to go fishing. But we had that my entire childhood. We had a compost in the back. And I'm just looking at my notes here. So just FYI, this is a picture of my compost pile right now. I took that a couple days ago. It's kind of like a still life, but you'll see in there my most critical tool is my turning fork. And the other critical item in here is the bucket that maintains a spot at our next to our kitchen sink that we fill religiously every night for dinner. All right, put the space bar. So tonight's.
Sometimes it's finicky.
What'd you just do?
I clicked back on the screen, and I think there's like multiple triggers in each slide, so you might just have to keep pressing until it
Okay,
goes to
press the
next one.
space bar?
Yes.
Okay.
There you go, like that.
Thank you. All right, so tonight's discussion, we're going to start with the benefits of composting, why we should do it, go into a little bit about what's happening in that rotting pile. How does it turn from a orange peel into compost? We're going to go over some of the methods for making a compost pile, whether it's an open pile or in a container. Once you have a container, how do you maintain the pile to make it a great environment for bugs and other critters to come in there and eat your stuff that you put in it. We're going to talk about the very controversial topic of achieving the optimal blend of what to put in your compost. I'm sure there's lots of people here that have opinions about what to go in and what doesn't, but we'll talk about that. What to do once your compost is finished, and then finally some online resources. I forgot to ask, I knew there was something else. By a show of hands, who in the audience maintains a compost pile right now, or has done it in their past life? All right, so that's about a third of the audience at least. Thank you for, hopefully you learned some things. And I want to say, if at any point you have questions or comments that you want to engage with me and the group while this is going on, please raise your hand and I'll do my best to answer the question. We will have plenty of time for questions at the end, and that includes the folks who are online as well, and Zach's maintaining the chat there. So the benefits of maintaining home composting. I started with the group that brought me here, and that's sustainability. By composting, you are reducing the amount of compostable food waste and other organic material that would otherwise go into the waste stream. Estimates are that about 40% of landfill content is made up of organic material that could very well be avoided. We save money on tipping fees. We extend the life of landfills, and it reduces greenhouse gases. Composting is an aerobic process, so it gives off CO2. When you put your vegetables and other waste in a landfill, it's anaerobic and it creates methane, which is a much more intense form of greenhouse gas. Second benefit is it keeps your waste on your property. It's sort of a virtuous cycle. And that's more important these days when we have so many invasives, whether it's invasive plants or jumping worms, that we really don't want to leave our property if you have them, or you have the need to bring in more stuff that could put you at risk of bringing those things to your property. So, having this closed loop is beneficial. The output of your composting is a beneficial organic material that you can put into your garden, which is really, the reward for what you're doing. And then finally, the big three of fun, family, and free. It's a great activity to do with your kids or family. It costs virtually nothing depending on how you want to do your compost, and it's healthy. Turning a compost pile, if you've ever done it, is a great whole full body workout. And I found that in the wintertime, it's my motivation to get outside. When that bucket is full, I have to trudge out to the frozen pile and take it out, and it's nice to be outside sometimes. All right, so the science of composting. What is happening? So the kind of the scientific description is it's a process of breaking down organic waste into nutrient-rich soil, into a nutrient-rich soil amendment. There's teeming with bacteria, fungus, and other small invertebrates that when we create this pile and give it the optimal conditions, will descend on our waste and eat it up, turn it into smaller and smaller particles that eventually release the nitrate molecules. And that's really what we're feeding. The output of the compost, the humus, is really designed to feed the soil so that the soil can feed the plant. So we're really feeding the soil when we make compost and reintroduce it back into our gardens. Hot versus, so I want to point you to this little flow chart here. So I created this little flow chart that really shows the inputs and the process of composting. It starts with the organic matter that you collect and you put into your pile. It's, as I said, an aerobic process, so it requires oxygen and water. And between the oxygen and the water, we create a very nice environment that will attract the fungus, the bacteria, and the small invertebrates that really do the work. I added in this process sunlight. If you maintain a compost here in Maine, you know that during the winter, it becomes a frozen block and it's almost impossible. It grinds to a halt in terms of decomposition. That sunlight does a little bit to keep the compost soft enough where you can kind of dig in there and make a space for new compost. So I think sunlight is a valuable thing. And finally, the time and effort is the other inputs. Depending on how much time and effort you want to make, it will determine how quickly and how you manage your compost. Any questions?
Cool versus hot composting.
Good, I missed that. So depending on the level of effort you want to make, you can treat your compost by turning it a great deal, adding greens and browns in just the right proportions, and that kind of gets you to the hot compost. Hot compost tends to degrade a lot faster. It could be, in the months range of turning your kitchen waste into humus, I would say humus, and or cold compost is basically when you do nothing. You maintain a pile, dump your stuff in, you don't turn it. It will decompose over the course of time. It'll take a lot longer, but there's really no effort. It's really the heat that's generated depending on the method you use. And I will get into that. Thanks. Sorry, I missed that point. All right. So styles of composting. So this is some images of compost piles and the containers that are used. So in the northwest quadrant or corner of this image, you see an open pile. It's basically just without any real structure, and there's nothing containing it other than the spot you choose to put that in. This is great if you have tons of space and don't have neighbors and really have, don't mind looking at this out your window, and it works. It may look like it's random in this pile, but the idea of having your compost be twice as wide as it is high works in these open piles to give you the proper air ventilation and aeration. It actually creates like a chimney effect in that open style. So there are some pros to it. To the right of that is just basically open fencing that you just bind together to create a cylinder. Very simple, very cheap. The downside is it's hard to dig in there, but if these are designed properly, you can actually lift the cage away, do your digging and turning to give it aeration, and put the top back on. It's not ideal, but it's a cheap and easy way. And then the lower left-hand corner has the type I have, which is made out of pallets. It has plenty of space for aeration, and you can do these for free if you use actual pallets, which mine is. This image looks like one that's real lumber. But the beauty of this is it's easy to turn. You can achieve a higher volume. Ideally, it's a cubic. You want a cubic yard in your compost pile if you can achieve it. And having 2 stalls gives you a spot for either finished compost or someplace where you can put leaves or grass that you want to add. So it's like a little stockpile. So that's a convenient one. The other 3 are ones that have a lot of value too. The one in the center is a turning composter that really saves your arms and backs if you want to just keep a tidy off the ground compost. That they work. I was just talking to someone who has one. The upper corner has another version of that. It's something you buy at the store. It's bottomless, and you just put your stuff in, and the finished compost comes out the bottom. And then the final one is actually a vermiculture. The benefit of this style of composting is you can do it year-round inside if you choose to bring wiggly worms in your house. It's very effective. It doesn't smell. The worms stay contained in the bucket. You can either buy one or make one out of a toter, and it's a great way to compost year-round without having to go outside. Any comments on any of these pros and cons, or anybody have experience with some of these that you like particularly? I've only ever done the open composting. I've never done the containers.
I have a container, but it isn't quite square. It's the round ones that actually the town years ago sold. And it comes apart, like there's 3 layers to it.
Right.
To dig down, you really have to take it apart, but it goes back together pretty well without much trouble.
Yep, so it's really, my subtitle here is composting can be as hard or as easy as you want it to be. Just pick a method that's suitable for you. If you have a small yard or you want to compost things that might attract animals, the enclosed compost is a great way. If you have a large property and it's appropriate to have one of these open ones, it's great too. There's really no wrong answer for this, these solutions. So here's the controversy, and we all have opinions about what goes into a compost pile. But the basic blend is green to brown, nitrogen to carbon, and the ideal volume mix between the 2 is 3 parts brown to 1 part green. And with that blend, and it's not easy to achieve, you can get that environment that will heat up in such a way that it will attract the insects and the fungus and the bacteria to come in and do its work. There's there's pluses and minuses. Too much brown will create a very slow composting process. It won't heat up. Too much green will make it heat up too much, and it might result in a compost fire, which we don't want. We want to keep our compost no higher than 160 degrees, which is very hot. So finding that nice blend is beneficial. And I've found that, you kind of see it, you use all your senses when you're out at the compost pile. If you have too much green or too much brown. Too much green, it's going to smell funny. It's going to be mushy and not really attractive. Too much brown is going to be crunchy and dry. So if you don't want to get too far into the ratios, I read something recently that I stole, which is the scratch versus squish ratio. So if you take a look at or pull a handful of your compost out and it's scratchy, it's too much brown and you need to add some of those greens. If it's too squishy, you need to add more of the browns. I'll go through some of the browns and greens because it is a little confusing when you think about some of the things here. For example, manure, which I have in my questionable pile, is colored brown, but it's actually a green. It really depends on the freshness of the item. Leaves that are green that have, say there's a summer storm and we have green leaves that fell on the ground and you want to put them in your compost, you're actually adding a green. Fall leaves are brown because all of the nitrogen has sort of left at that point and you're composting something that is more carbon rich. Same with hay and straw. Hay is green, it's alive when it was cut. Straw was dead when it was cut. It is difficult to get enough browns at time, especially in the summer. So if you find that you don't have enough brown leaves stockpiled or in your pile, the addition of wood chips, wood shavings, wood ash are fine. Papers, compressed paper, egg cartons, or the cartons that you get when you order something online, and it's sort of like that fiber carton, perfectly good to put in your compost. I recommend you dip it and soak it in water first, or else it'll take forever for it to lose its structure. Shredded paper and cardboard, but avoid cardboard that has dyes and coatings because they can have PFAS and other things that we don't want. Yes.
So when you talk about do you rip it all up, make it into tiny pieces?
I do rip it up. It really depends on how much effort you want to put into it, but I'll put pieces that, are like smaller than a postcard, a small mailing envelope. And if I can tear it a little bit smaller is better because it creates more surface area. So generally, I don't tear up any of our kitchen waste. It's small enough when I put it in there. But for browns, because they are a little bit more rigid and you want to kind of have a mesh into your pile, tearing them up is valuable. If you have a shredder, and I've talked to people who have cardboard shredders, that's the way to go. But I just tear mine up.
And how about pine needles?
I left that off here and I'm sorry I did. Yes, they are compostable. They're a brown. They're not my favorite thing to add because it just seems like it messes with the texture, and it will take a long time to decompose, but they're perfectly fine to add. You had a question?
Would that might have been pressure treated?
I would avoid that because all the chemicals in your pressure treated will, find their way into the compost and eventually leach back into the soil. If you're a flower gardener versus a food gardener, I think you can be a little bit more liberal with what you put in terms of making it organic, because you're not going to eat that. But if you're eating and you want it to be organic, I would tend to be more on the conservative side in terms of avoiding things that may have been treated, pressure treated, coated, to keep them out of this, virtuous cycle that we're building in our yards. Questionable things, and well, I can't leave the greens until I go to the last item in the line, urine. It is filled with nitrogen. We're talking human urine here. So, if anybody doesn't mind going outside and peeing in the pile, it is a fantastic way to build nitrogen in your pile. I follow an online group that talks about maintaining compost piles, and it's one of the most popular topics. Yes.
Mary online asks, is the paper of a coffee filter okay? And is it green or brown?
Coffee itself is green, and the filter, I would say if it's depending on what it's made from, but I would call it a brown, but coffee is a good green, the spent grounds, and tea bags as well. Same deal. Some of the questionable I'm sorry, was it, yes, go ahead.
Orange peel, I avoided citrus.
I've read some things that say too much. Say if you have a kid and playing soccer and you bring home like 5 pounds of orange peels, I wouldn't do that. But just the day-to-day consumption, it's not going to hurt the chemistry of your pile.
How about lemon?
Same. Yeah. If you're not using an exorbitant amount, totally fine to put in your composter.
I put also, if it's okay, I put banana peels.
Yeah, yep, sure. Any of those kitchen, things, vegetable and fruit waste is generally fine. I put a little note to myself here. My least favorite thing to add to my pile is corn husks and corn cobs. I just, it just gets stuck and doesn't decompose, and those husks are, the cobs get in the way, but you're more than, welcome to add them to your pile. I've even seen people cut up the cobs, which is a lot of work, but I don't do that.
Can I just ask one more?
Yes.
About lobster shells or clam shells?
Yes, fish and mollusk scraps are greens, and they're perfectly fine to add to your pile. If you have an open pile, the best practice is to really bury it, because animals will come and root that out and want to dig it. That was probably one of the funnest things I put in our compost pile, was a big carcass of a flounder that a friend had caught. And when she gave it to me, she said, when you bring it home, bury it and come back in a week, and I guarantee you every bit of that flounder carcass is going to be gone, with the exception of one little bone at its nose. And I did exactly what she said, and I went back a week later and looked in my pile, and it was completely gone. And I actually found that bone. There's one bone that didn't decompose. It's very, very strange, but I thanked her for the flounder. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. Yes, Zach.
Would it be all right if we shared this slide with the registrants?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. I designed them and, did it within the intent that they be shared. Maintaining your pile. So once you get a spot and a structure, now you start building your pile. And I talked about ripping or chopping things into smaller bits is beneficial. The variety of size and texture is actually helpful because it creates aeration. If everything's all mushy, it's going to be, you're never going to get the aeration. But if things have, holes and air spots, you want to, kind of take the time to create that little variety of the textures and sizes. The ideal level, as I said, is 1 cubic yard, 3 by 3 by 3. It takes a while to do that. I'm not there yet with mine, and it does keep shrinking, so you have to keep putting more stuff in to help maintain that size. And the size is designed to really create the volume that creates heat, which is what we're looking for. Speaking of the heat, monitor when you go out and turn your pile. Using all your senses here. You want to smell it, you want to touch it, and ideally you're going to start this time of year. Your compost pile should be heating up, and you should see the temperature of the pile feel beyond ambient temperature into the 100 and 160 degree. That's when you're cooking. If you're not doing a cold compost, if you're doing designed to heat it up, that's when the bugs are doing their thing. You will see when it gets really hot, you won't see any evidence of worms or bugs in your pile. They'll vacate, which is completely normal and natural. They're there for a certain phase of the decomposition, but when it gets too hot, they move on. The good number of 120 degrees is when we kill the seeds that you don't want to live on in whatever your next use is. So it happens, and it's not the worst thing in the world, because invasives or other weed seeds can fall from the sky and infiltrate your garden all the time. So it's not the end of the world if you have seeds that you don't want show up in your compost.
Can you speak about adding water? I've never added water.
Water is an essential part of the whole process, because it really creates that, sort of cycle that is beneficial for the fungus and the bacteria. And it should feel, if you pick up a ball of compost in your hand, it should hold together, but it shouldn't be dripping wet. So if it's like dry and that's the squish and scratch dynamic too. If it's just crispy, add water. And it takes a surprising amount of water to really keep it wet. A lot of the water that, if you have an open compost and it rains, it runs off the sides. It really doesn't infiltrate. So regularly maintaining and keeping an eye on it, turning it, are the ways to really keep it suitably wet. And if it's too dry, adding water is fine.
How often do you water yours?
It depends. Mine needs it right now. I added a bunch of browns that I raked up from my yard, dead grass. And I have a sample of it right here you can look at later. It's too dry right now. So when I get a chance over the weekend, I'm gonna squirt mine and I'll dig it up a little bit, squirt some water, dig it, move it, squirt some more, and just get it a little bit more wet, because it's too dry right now. More about, we just talked about manage the moisture. As I said, if another analogy is, it feels like a wrung out sponge. It feels a little wet, but it's not dripping of wet water. So you can do that test. Turning the pile is really essential if you want to avoid having too much of that mucky stuff. Turning it to aerate it is really I found an extremely important method to keep the decomposition process moving on a fast basis.
You aerate it weekly?
I probably aerate mine, because I like to be out there 3 times a week using a turning. I have this little guy. Is great. If you have a smaller one and you really have some roots in there that you want to get rid of, this is essential. I use this for when I had a cage, one of those round cages, because I couldn't get the turning fork in there. So I swear by this. I have a friend who uses rebar, a length of rebar. If you have bad shoulders, bad back, and don't want to be lifting as much, getting a length of rebar and just sort of ramming it in and going like this, pick it up, ram it in, and do that over and over. You can do the same thing with a PVC pipe. I tried that and I didn't feel like it was effective, but the rebar idea can work really well if you don't want to have to lift and turn. And then, while you're doing all this, you're going to be observing the heat, the speed of decomposition, and if you feel like you need to, change the ratios, you can do that by either adding more greens or more browns. And I skipped it before, but one of the other additives you can use are some accelerants, and I have one here that I'll make a pitch for. This is called Kraken. I bought it at Salisbury's Gardening Center in Town Hill, and it's made from green crab. It smells horrible, but the selling point of this stuff is it's fine. There's a beneficial use for those green crabs. And this is a product that's on the market now. It's a local guy, and you can buy it at Salisbury's in Town Hill. So, and I've put it in, and I do feel like it's heating up my compost by putting this in there. All right, so We talked about 2 months to 2 years, depending on how, you're into, maintaining and heating up your compost. When it's done, you can know it by looking at it, and the soil you shouldn't see any like parts of a tomato or an orange peel in there. It should be unrecognizable and fairly consistent. It should smell sweet. And by this time, the temperature should have steadied, and you're in like the curing phase. There's the decomposition phase, there's the curing phase, and then there's a little bit more that happens once you put it in the ground. But you'll know it when you see it, because it'll look unrecognizable to soil. Once you pull it out, you will find, like I even have in some finished compost here, there's still some root matter and some other things. This is an image of a screen that you can either purchase or construct yourself to screen out all the little bits and pieces that are still in this, so you have like a nice smooth texture and consistency, and just throw the stuff that you screened out back in your pile. Now, the surprising thing is, don't use too much compost in your garden. 2 to 3 inches, either dug in, depending on what type of garden you have, or placed on top as a mulch, is more than enough if you do it every year. Too much can cause the phosphates and potassium to get too high in your garden, because they don't really wash away. The nitrates are the thing that you really want there, and they'll continue to break down with that compost years after you put it in, to create that beneficial environment for the roots. But I have read and talked to people who use 100% compost for some of their flowers and pots, and they say it works, and tomatoes. So, the textbook says don't use too much, but if you want to experiment in a pot with something, go right ahead. Compost tea. Has anybody ever made it? It's really a way to accelerate or increase the population of the beneficial microbes. You take compost, put it in a mesh bag, immerse it in water, just like you're making tea, but in this case, you can use like a 5-gallon plastic bucket. Add molasses, which is sort of like a accelerator, and it's like you're brewing something, and it supposedly increases the beneficial microbes. It needs aeration to work also. I made it without aeration. I don't know if it worked, but it's something fun to try. I've read that it's really not necessary. You can just get the same benefits by topping off your gardens with regular compost. You don't need to make the liquid that you pour on, but it's a method.
So when you say you put the compost, so is it the stuff that you've already finished? Or
Yep. Finished compost, put it in a mesh bag or a pair of old pantyhose, if you still have them around, and dunk it into a reservoir of water with an aerator, like you use for a fish, an aquarium. It needs that air, and a little molasses, and over a course of a day, it'll transfer all the goodness into the water, plus the added benefit of the additional microbes that have come to join the party that you pour over your plants. If after it's finished you have excess that you're not going to use that gardening year, you can store it in a covered container. It will kind of go into a state of suspended animation. All of the living things will die off, but the spores can get reanimated if you add water to it and put it out into your garden the next year. So you don't want to keep it in your compost pile forever, because it will leach away all its goodness. So if you have extra, you can store it, and use it in the future. And here's an interesting fact. Fertile soil only contains about 5% organic material. The vast majority of what we dig in our gardens is sand, silt, and clay. and crushed up rock and granite. So that was a surprising statistic for me. So you really, and that goes back to how much compost do you need? You don't need that much to really increase the health of your soil. Here's another plug. If after hearing this presentation, you choose not to compost yourself, or you want to do something more to reduce the waste stream, Chickadee Compost is a service, and it is a new thing on the island. It's a partnership between the Bar Harbor Garden Club, Maine Coast Heritage Trust, and a business called Chickadee Composting, which is located in Surrey. They come, it's a subscription-based service for $10 a month. You can have the right to take a bucket of compost to a transfer station, a little cute shed at Stone Barn, and swap it out for an empty bucket. In exchange for giving, the payment and giving your compost material over, you're entitled to get compost, it's like 5 gallons, Barbara, I forget the exact, 2 5-gallon buckets, 2 to 3.
How it works is that we didn't purchase the service that bucket is being washed. You basically just dump it into a bigger bin.
Oh, okay, so
Take your compost, there's like 7 or 8 bins in the shed, and you dump your compost, and you just take that bucket home. We did give away 50 buckets at the beginning for the charter subscribers, the ones who signed up. But we're past the 50 now, so we're allowed by Maine Coast Heritage Trust 75.
okay, so there's
We have plenty of
room for
new
more.
subscribers. If anybody's interested, they can sign up, and it's a great program. $10 a month, and you just collect your food waste on your kitchen counter, then bring it to the bins that are in a shed at Stone Barn.
Thank you for the detail. The thing that I think is a value added to the Chickadee service that I don't do myself is table scraps, cooked food, meat, dairy, fatty things that I would not put in my own compost. You can add it to this mixture. And the difference is they're industrial size composting, huge. I've seen pictures of it, and you may have been to their farm. It's a huge operation, and their piles are so large, and they maintain it in such a way that the heat that's generated from these piles breaks down all of the pathogens and other things that you really wouldn't want in your little compost pile. They can handle it. So it's a great way to get table scraps out of the waste stream as well, if you want to do that instead or in addition to your own composting.
So then how do you get the compost back? So if I bring my scraps, my compost, then where do I pick up what?
The finished compost.
Well, you get some free compost. You get, I think it's 6 gallons in a bag in the spring and the fall.
Okay.
But then if you want, you can buy more from her. She sells compost as a commercial enterprise. So by being a subscriber, she gives you kind of like introductory compost for the season, and you use that. But if you want to have more, you can buy from her.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's a great service and a really innovative way to increase, we do take food out of the waste stream. And finally, before we get to more questions, just some resources, and you'll have this if you, Zach's going to provide this, so just some things that I used and continue to use when I try and understand composting are a couple books, The Complete Guide to Compost Gardening, the Rodale Book of Composting. And if you've read anything about the history of composting, which I have, Rodale was a pioneer in the composting world. And then online, University of Maine Cooperative Extension has some great information. They even have a composting camp 2 times a year. If you go on to the Cooperative Extension website, they have a 5-day camp in the summer and fall. They take field trips and you do like a really intensive on composting at UMaine. Joe Gardner is a favorite of mine. He has some great podcasts and he's all over YouTube with his composting tips. And then the other thing that I follow is on Reddit. If you're on there at all, the subreddit on composting is really a great resource. So they are my prepared slides and remarks. I'm happy to take any questions from you. And Zach, if there's any questions from your group, we can shift over to that now.
So what do you do, or what's a good technique to keep critters out of it? You have an open composting machine.
What I do is when I can, when it's frozen, it's hard to do, but when it's soft, when I come out with a bucket and dump in, I create like a little well, bury it in the center of the compost heap, and then cover it over. That's really the only thing, unless you want to completely, contain, fence it in and keep a lid on it, which defeats the purpose of the open ones, the containers and the thing, the plastic things that you can buy. It's not a problem, but it's hard. And every once in a while we'll see a tomato or something that's in our yard that clearly some little animal has grabbed and moved around. Any other questions? Jack, do we have any from online?
No questions online.
Great.
Question. So there was a picture of the bin, the pallet.
Yes.
Open.
Yes.
It had two sides. So when do you stop adding, to one side, and then do you start the other side to let the one on one side? Yeah,
Sure. The ideal size, and if it gets any bigger, you should probably move on, is 3 by 3 by 3, a cubic yard.
Okay.
So when it gets, that picture of mine is not quite there. Oopsie. I just screwed that up. Sorry, Zach.
We're trying to get back to the slides.
Yeah. Yep.
I wish, right?
All right.
Which one are you trying to go to?
Yeah, this one. So that's probably 3 by 2. I'm about a foot short. And that's a lot of compost. So for our use at home, we won't use all this compost this year. But if you get to that size, move on. Or with the double or triple stalls, that's sort of like the 3-car garage is that what everybody wants. You can have finished compost in one and use the other as stockpile of other materials that you want to add. Like at this time of year, finding fall leaves is really difficult, but if you find some dried grass or fall leaves, you can add them to the side stall to be your sort of supply. I did fail to mention something else, and that's this handy thing here, which is pulp paper that we get 1 million of them in the summertime when you buy blueberries and other stuff. This is a fixture on our kitchen counter next to our cutting board. My husband, George, who's in the back, is our cook, and it's right next to the cutting board, and this gets filled up every night. And it makes things so much easier. The habit of finding the stuff that you want to compost and putting it in the pile can be a little difficult from time to time because it's messy and smelly. But having a system that you stick with, having a good inside container that doesn't release the smell, and having an easy way to transport it over there. And then when this gets used up, we throw it right in the compost. So we save these. We have probably 50 of them underneath our sink. So just another little technique. Yes, Zach.
So some feedback in the chat. A couple people thanking you, saying they're very inspired and that they learned a lot. So
oh, thank you.
Thank you very much for everyone at home and here as well.
Great, I appreciate that. Like I said, I'm an enthusiast, not an expert. So really, I'm relaying the information that I've learned just from doing this over a long period of time, trial and error, and neglect at times in our compost. All right, so that's it. Thank you.
Do you use your charcoal filter on your compost bucket?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How often do you change? I mean, probably a bucket like that.
Yep.
No?
I wash it when it starts to smell funny.
Okay, but you just wash it and let it dry?
Yeah, there's like two, this one comes with 2 filters. And I, let them dry out and set it outside, on the back porch to dry it out and put it back in. But I think they're essential to keep the stink out.
Yeah. Are yours like at least 8 inches?
It's like one of the filters is this big and the other filter's square and it's this big.
Thank you.